i.e., we're being subjected to a whole series of false flags. And false flags have been the modus operandi that the matrix powers have used on us, not starting with, but most recently with the assassination of U.S. President John F. Kennedy on November 22nd, 1963, which was a coup d'etat, and by the highest levels of the military and financial and political actors in the U.S. and in the world, going up to 9/11, going up to Hurricane Katrina, the U.S. Now, which brings us up to tonight's topic, which is the Ebola.
Yes.
And what I'd like to do is just take a moment and put on the table the different cards so people begin to understand how a pandemic false flag can be done, because it was done in 1919 and 50 million people died worldwide, and the same methodology could be used now. Let's start out. I'm going to start out just reading the very words of the press release of the New York City Health Department dated August 1st, 2014. Mark you, today's Saturday, August 2nd. So this is as we're speaking. Okay. It starts out, today the health department is conducting the largest no-notice emergency response exercise in New York City history that will test our ability to respond to the release of a biological agent called RAMPEX, which stands for Rapid Activation for Mass Prophylaxis Exercise. The exercise involves notifying and deploying over 1,500 staff from more than a dozen city agencies and setting up 30 temporary locations that will be used, and this is the key phrase, to rapidly dispense life-saving medication in the event of an emergency. To rapidly dispense life-saving medication in the event of an emergency. Instead of life-saving medication, read vaccines, okay? Read Ebola vaccines. The New York City Health Department is responsible for developing and executing plans for the mass dispensing of life-saving medicine in response to public health emergency. This exercise demonstrates our commitment to ensuring that we have the capability and resources to protect the health and safety of New Yorkers in times of crisis. Now, you put that together with the FEMA regulations and the presidential executive orders that Barack Obama has signed, where if you don't take the vaccines, you can be shot on the spot or you can be quarantined in a FEMA camp. Okay? Hello?
I'm listening to you.
Okay. So that's the setup. Now, that's card number one.
Mm-hmm.
Now, let me go over here to card number two so that people can begin to realize the scale of what's going on. Okay?
Got it.
This is from a study. In 1918, it was not the Spanish flu that killed 20 to 50 million people. It was the cabal, first with vaccines and then with aspirin. And there's all sorts of links on that. I posted them on Facebook in our Facebook group. We have a Facebook group called Alfred Webre. On my profile, people can go to Alfred Webre and see it. And we are going to be posting these online in our news website called ecologynews.com. We'll be posting these updates so you can go and see ecologynews.com. But the basic methodology is the flu didn't kill the people, the vaccines and the aspirin did. That's what killed the 50 million people.
So, and aren't they talking? They're talking about, if I remember correctly, they're talking about actually creating a vaccine for this that they want to distribute come here in September. Is that correct?
Yeah. In fact, they don't have, quote, end of quote, oh, we haven't developed a vaccine for Ebola yet. Oops.
Oops.
Yeah. Okay. So, like, now, let me take a detour, okay? And just, if you can, just maintain the two cards that we've laid down on the table. First of all, the drill that happened yesterday, in which the Department of Health said that this drill was to rapidly dispense life-saving medication in the event of of an emergency, right?
Right.
And if you don't, and they have regulations backed up by presidential executive orders now, that if you're in line and you refuse, they have soldiers there with guns who can shoot you on the spot. Or they can put you in a FEMA camp and isolate you. Okay? Number one. And number two, the fact that, and we'll be posting all the links here, in 1918, it was not the flu that killed 20 to 50 million people. It was the cabal. First with vaccines and then with aspirin. So just keep that in your minds. Now, I'm going to take a little walk through history around the last, not the last, because they certainly tried with SARS, but something that we're all familiar with, and that's the AIDS virus.
Yes.
We now know, as people have suspected, and there's a lot of literature this on the internet, just Google it, the AIDS virus is a bioweapon that was developed at Fort Detrick, Maryland by the U.S. Army as a bioweapon. It was first field tested by U.S. Army Rangers who took it to Africa, where it was shielded inside. It was embedded inside a smallpox vaccine.
Really?
Yeah, this is how AIDS came to Africa, that has decimated Africa.
Interesting.
For the last 40 years. Interesting, it's a war crime.
Yeah, well, here's the thing. You know, the United States military, at least myself, I was given not only smallpox vaccine, but I was given anthrax vaccine as well. I'm wondering if they have also, because as we know, I have an autoimmune disease problem.
Well, you know, that could have come from there, but this was a bioweapon attack by the United States Army on the people of Africa. And they went to South Africa. They went to different parts of Africa on a humanitarian mission. The United States Army. Listen to the war crimes. This is horrific. Inside, embedded inside these smallpox vaccines, Army Rangers had the AIDS virus. And they infected the population. Women, children. And that's how Africa has gotten AIDS.
I am
which all of Africa is dying from now. You know, which is now embedded in all of their, you know, there are men out there. There's the meme out there that if a man who has AIDS has sex with a young girl, they'll get rid of the AIDS. For decades, all the presidents of South Africa you know, would not allow any steps to be taken against AIDS because they, you know, he didn't think that AIDS was serious. I think that they were part of the CIA depopulation program. This is horrific what the United States has done as an agent of, you know, the darkest forces on the planet, the monarchy, the world Zionists that are in the service of the Draco reptilians, of the Satanists, of the Orion Greys, of the darkest forces in our universe, dimensional forces. That's what's happened to Africa. Now, what's more is this, and you know, tomorrow we have our Gay Pride Parade here in Vancouver, and it's a huge event. And we were just watching on PBS television. We get the Seattle PBS television, and the British actor Stephen Fry, who's openly gay, has done a series in which he travels all over the world and he confronts homophobia. He even went to St. Petersburg, Russia, to the office of the legislator there that introduced the law that made it illegal in St. Petersburg to make gay, what they call gay propaganda, which, you know, what is gay propaganda? Which then Putin adopted and made it nationwide, right? And so and Fry is tremendous because he sat down in front of this guy and Fry said, "What basis do you have for making this?" And this politician said, "Well, you know, an evil angel fell down from heaven and came to earth, you know." So it's all this fundamentalist crap. You follow me?
I am, yes.
Yeah. So I mean, and he went to Brazil, to Sao Paulo, where even now gays are being murdered. There was a young boy who a bunch of skinheads thought that he, quote, looked gay, so they beat him up and then they killed him. And that was an incident which really mobilized all of Brazil. And there were 4 million people at last year's Gay Pride Parade. I mean, you don't have to be gay to march in the Gay Pride Parade.
Isn't there a law, and I forget which area of Africa, but if you are found out to be gay, you are subject to the death penalty?
That's in Uganda. And Stephen Fry went to Uganda and he confronted the legislators that put that in. And the guy is totally brave and over the top. If you can see that series, it's on PBS. It's enormous. I'm building up to it.
Okay.
And so that, what happened then? This, at the same time that they deployed the U.S. Army Rangers on their humanitarian mission with the smallpox vaccine in which the AIDS virus was embedded and thereby gave AIDS to the African continent, which they've now had for 40 years, giving untold suffering, through the New York City Medical Examiner's Office, they began a series of experiments on gay people in New York that were misleading. And they went to bathhouses and all of that, and they infected the gay people in New York through the medical examiner under the guise of the Department of Health. This is the U.S. intelligence agencies using the U.S. Army. You know, it's the U.S. Army intelligence. All your tax dollars. Aren't they nice guys? Those genociders. That's what they did. And that's how the AIDS epidemic got started in the United States. It's biowarfare by the U.S. government against the people. And that's why we've had the AIDS. And you remember the AIDS quilts? I remember.
I remember those.
I lived in Manhattan at that time. Everybody was dying.
Yep. Well, that was the time when Rock Hudson came out, and everybody was. There was a huge pandemic.
Oh yeah, 3 of my brothers are openly gay. So it's like, this is like open warfare, right? By the government, but genocidal. Not only against people in one's own country, but against the world. So that is biowarfare. And that's what the U.S. Army and the CIA, prompted by the black monarchies, the UK monarchy, Queen Elizabeth and her consort, Prince Philip, who are the biggest, eugenicists in the world, the world Zionists in the city of London, led by the Rothschilds and the 13 bloodline families, the Dutch monarchy, where they even had to kill their own prince, assassinate him, because, and this all came out through the International Common Law Court of Justice in Brussels, led by Kevin Annett. They now have testimony that the Dutch prince, they have organized where they get young kids, teenagers, both men and women, they strip them naked, they bring them out to the woods, and then they hunt them down and kill them for sport.
The rich, the monarchs.
Yeah, that's what they do.
Surprisingly enough, there was a movie that's out right now called The Purge. Have you heard about this movie, Alfred?
I've heard about it. I haven't seen it.
They do something very similar to what you were just describing. Is these so-called rich, elites actually they kidnap these people during the time of the purge. It takes place one day a week, one day a year, and that they literally hunt them down as sport to, purge themselves of their wrongdoings, their sins. Right.
And so I guess that since it all comes out in the movies, that's probably a PSYOP strategy where they leak a little bit of it, and then everybody says, you saw that in the movie. It's not
movies.
True. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And that's exactly what they do. Hollywood is the most notorious of doing these type of, I almost feel that they're almost ritualistic in a way, because they allow viewers to participate in that ritual.
Now,
and how does that work on the collective consciousness?
Yeah. Now, a colleague of mine from Spain has written a book on Hollywood, and you pretty much don't get anywhere unless you participate in satanic rituals.
Well, in the music business and everything.
Right, exactly. So now, I can see that we're coming up to the end of the hour. Do you take a break?
Yeah, we're going to take a break here in about 1 minute, so we got a little bit of time to kind of discuss what we're going to go into second hour.
Okay. I'll say it real briefly. This is the third card. I am looking here, and we'll go in it in depth. This is the third card. I'm looking at the patent that the U.S. government owns, dated 2010, on, quote, the human Ebola virus, species and compositions and methods thereof.
They
own it. They own it.
They own the Ebola. Yes, I saw that patent earlier today. We'll be right back, guys. This is 32 Degrees of Insanity with my special guest, Alfred Webre. And, of course, we'll bring Ben back on, my co-host. But stay tuned. This next hour is going to be one of the most important hours that you're going to know and get to know about this Ebola virus and what is going on in the United States and throughout the world with Alfred Webre. Please stick around. You guys are listening to 32 Degrees of Insanity. Is 9:56/8/2014. We'll be right back with a little bit of station break right at about 2 minutes after the hour. So please stick around. We'll be right back. You know, it never surprises me when Alfred comes on. And Alfred really was, I mean, last hour, I mean, Alfred is videotaping this for his actualpolitics.tv on YouTube. And, man, I saw Alfred's face just like literally get, I mean, this is very passionate for Alfred. And I mean, this is ridiculous. I mean, war crimes against humanity. I mean, we can't, this is something that, you know, positive timeline or not, we are witnessing genocide. We are. And it really just, it bothers me to my soul. And right before we went into break, we started talking about how the United States has a patent. How do you have a patent on a disease? What say you, Alfred Webre? Bring me back on. I want to talk about this. This is ridiculous that we are creating. The CDC is creating viruses like the Ebola virus that can kill and take away this population with a moment dime. I saw something the other day. It was just a game. It's called Virus or something. But this kid was basically started a virus and he watched it mutate throughout the world. And the last particular place to get infected, where the whole world was pretty much gone, but the last place to get infected, and it took a lot to get infected, was Greenland. Because of how cold it is there. Now, I mean, are we going to see a mass pandemic, Alfred? What's going on here?
Well, yeah, so what we're trying to do in this show tonight, as you said, is to really inform people as to the various cards that these parties are trying to play, and as to the methodologies that they're attempting to use. And we showed the methodology that they used in 1918, which is that you make the disease, you blame this flu, but you load the stuff into the vaccine.
Yep.
And that's what they did in Africa. They went with the smallpox vaccine and they loaded the AIDS virus into that. And then the medical examiner in New York loaded the AIDS virus into these medical experiments in the gay community. You know, so it's always this Trojan horse, because it's bioweapons. So now they're coming to the end game. The end game, as we know from the Georgia Guidestones, is to get the world's population down to about 500 million.
Yep.
Yeah, so it's basically like that. You've got the Queen, the royal family, the UK Queen, you've got the Dutch crown, you've got the black nobility of Europe. They call them the black nobility because they worship Satan. You've got, you know, the entire satanic structure of the planet. Most anybody who's into power structures, either at the corporate level, the media level, at the government level, has got to be a Satanist, or they're in deep denial about it. But essentially, you know, they're all walking around showing the Satan sign, right? You've seen pictures of that.
Of course, yeah. You know, just recently, Barack Obama was down here at Irvine doing the commencement address, and here he is at the end, you know, showing these, you know, people are saying, oh no, that was the anteater sign because the mascot is anteater. Well, I find it kind of funny that out of all the colleges in the world that he could do a commencement speech, he finds a particular college that is very close to the satanic sign, and you see him and the rest of everybody just flaunting it right in front of us.
Yeah, yeah. So it's just, the world is in denial, and it's like chemtrails. You should have millions of people look up, and they don't see anything, or they go into denial. And yeah, those are the nanoparticles that are turning you into robots. Are going to kill you, but You know, they've made the earth into a great gas chamber, but people are like sheeple. They're behaving in a certain program way. So let's begin to examine the methodology here, and let's deconstruct their attempted Ebola false flag. First of all, we know from 1918 that they had to make the Spanish flu the enemy, even though the vaccine was the enemy and the aspirin was the enemy. And we'll put up all those links up on ecologynews.com so you can all get them. And so here, the Ebola virus is the enemy, right? And yet, and we'll put all the links up, there are cures to the Ebola virus. We have Dr. Rita LeBeau, and it's in a simple 2-minute video that we'll put up. Nanosilver completely neutralizes it, and nanosilver is completely cheap, non-toxic. It's available to everyone. It can be used for the entire planet and completely wipe out and neutralize Ebola forever. Okay? It's like it makes it a non-issue.
A non-issue, yeah.
Yeah. And so that's there. But of course, if you have a false flag going, well, that's going to be buried someplace, right? But I mean, the fact of nanosilver, but that's available. Secondly, there's an alternative which is called ultraviolet germicidal irradiation. So that's available also. And so those are there. Now, let's go to the elements of the false flag, and they involve disinformation. So I'm looking at some of the analysis. They say, right now, the CDC, Centers for Disease Control in Atlanta, they're the major disinformationalist, along with the WHO, the World Health Organization, in creating this false flag. Right now, the WHO says that Ebola is 90% fatal and impossible to cure. That is a complete lie. That's the hope that CDC, WHO, and the creators of this false flag, who are trying to depopulate, want the public to think. They want the public to think that we're facing annihilation, but which isn't true.
Right.
And so that we would think that, so that the U.S. population would think that it's doomed, because Ebola is going to spread across the country and be out of control. For example, in Germany, one of the main newspapers there, Bild, is now claiming that American Ebola victim Patrick Sawyer, one of the people, may have infected 30,000 people already, meaning that he's already infected 30,000, and then those 30,000 are going to infect others. So that's going to start the pandemic. So that's disinformation. And the Daily Mail, which is a UK newspaper, has quoted Derek Gatherer, a virologist at Lancaster University, saying that Ebola is as infectious as flu and could start a global pandemic.
Well, that's untrue.
Yeah, exactly. So also, those of us, and I'm sure you have seen the statistics also, is that if you begin to look at the mysterious deaths over the past decade, among the highest ranking mysterious deaths are virologists, scientists who are experts on germ warfare.
Well,
and who don't work for the government.
Wasn't the disappearing plane the Malaysian disappearing plane. Didn't they have? They were heading to an AIDS conference, weren't they? Correct? Was that?
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So you know, and maybe that itself was a psyops, you know, to kind of like signal that as ah ha ha, you know.
Right. Yeah.
You
Yeah.
know, it's like these people are monstrous. So that's the condition we're in. Think about when you go back to the assassination of John F. Kennedy, the first of the major false flags of the last century says, oh, Lee Harvey Oswald acted alone, where, you know, you had George H.W. Bush was coordinating the rifle teams in just one of the buildings. You know what I mean? I mean, it was a major operation.
And clearly his picture is there, right there on the footsteps of
Exactly. Exactly. And the Secret Service was totally infiltrated and totally part of it. I mean, it was just like a complete government job. 9/11, everybody from the Joint Chiefs of Staff, the NSA, the CIA, every alphabet agency was operational in 9/11. And we know from time travel and from our colleague Andrew D. Basiago's whistleblowing, which I, as a judge on the 9/11 War Crimes Tribunal, am in receipt of his sworn affidavit that in 1971, the CIA and DARPA had time-traveled moving images of 9/11, of what happened at the World Trade Center. So that's when they, and Donald Rumsfeld was the defense liaison to the time travel project, and he was a member of the cabinet of Richard Nixon, whose national security advisor was Henry Kissinger, who is the advisor to the Rothschilds.
Oh yeah.
So there,
monster there.
Yeah. So there you have 1971 to 2001 is 30 years. You have 30 years of forward planning of 9/11 as an inside job. It's all documented. It's all there. So this is how now we know how. We're just laying bare right here on this show right now how the Ebola false flag is getting started, right? Mm-hmm. So we just showed how they're creating the Daily Mail, the Bill, the CDC is creating all these lies. Now, let's go to a second item. There's presidential orders that if you're in line for vaccines and you balk or, you know, some other thing happens, they can order you to a FEMA camp, or they can shoot you on the spot if you're, you know.
Let me ask you one quick question, Alfred,
yeah.
in regards to this. Okay, we've been having this huge immigration problem that, you know, Obama bringing over.
I brought that up today.
These children, could they be vaccinating these people and then sending them out into the population, and that's how we might be getting infected? Because if they come in, you know, they want to stay, they got to get it, they got to get vaccinated.
There you have 50,000 vectors.
Yeah, right there.
Yeah. By the way, I should tell you, and I should tell your listening audience, that I have a certificate from the Harvard School of Public Health. Mm-hmm. So I'm a little bit conversant in the area of public health.
Sure.
You know, so I'm not like totally talking off the top of my head, you know. And you've got 50,000 vectors today. Vectors, isn't it coincidental that all of a sudden you have the CIA creating and pushing, all the intelligence agencies creating and pushing a wave of 50,000 illegals coming in, the intelligence agencies pulling back all of the immigration, the President of the United States, who is nothing but a lackey to the black nobility and the world Zionists, just trashing the U.S. borders and trashing any notion of what it is to be an American, right?
Correct.
And they are 50,000 vectors. They're like 50,000 infected vectors that are going to run around, and they can be blamed. They're the patsies, right?
They're the patsies. Yep.
They're the Lee Harvey Oswalds. Now, so very good. I'm glad that you brought that up, because it's pure. It's pure. It's pure.
And here's the thing. We've got more than half of them, which are children.
Yeah.
So what a great way to get it going is hit them at the young age, get them all infected, genocide with the kill. Then we can't have anybody reborn. There can't be, it's almost an extinction of the human race.
Now, in case you were thinking you're going to get away with it, Barack Obama, Barry Soetoro, who's a very dark entity, by the way. I mean, people who don't think that Barack Obama's dark and who still enmeshed in the propaganda are just swallowing poison.
But he was born in Hawaii, Kenya, that is.
No. People can go online and look at our PowerPoint on the making of a Manchurian Candidate, which more than 75,000 people have seen. And he was most likely born in the state of Washington.
State of Washington?
Yeah. There's some chance that he was born in British Columbia, but probably in the state of Washington.
Interesting. And this is new information. I have not heard this one.
Well, I'd be glad to come on a show.
And we could talk. We could talk exclusively on
that. Yeah, sure.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So now, the regulations which Barack Obama has signed are draconian, where you suddenly lose all rights with a declaration of a health emergency. And not only that, let me read this, so that all of a sudden you're in line, and the New York City Health Commissioner says, we're overwhelmed. We're going to have to transport everybody in New York to FEMA camps, okay? Because we're overwhelmed. We just can't do it. Okay?
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to quote, guillotines have been installed in boxcars intended for transport to FEMA camps.
Mm-hmm.
The article refers to them as UN boxcars. According to the Obamacare above article, it was the Department of Homeland Security that sent out the execution coding to the states. So DHS put in execution coding of guillotines inside Obamacare. So this is all going to be done as part of Obamacare. You're going to be executed because you have been determined to be like Ebola, and there's no cure, so they're going to have to guillotine you. And Christopher Story wrote about this in his book 20 years ago, which is called The New Underworld World Order, which, if you want to, you can just go to exopolitics.com. It's a 700-page book. I highly recommend it, and download it for free. And he had it there. He said, you guys are just sitting ducks. Now, as beyond grotesque, I just really want to read this so people start getting this stuff, because Americans are living in a fairy tale. As beyond grotesque as it is for the U.S. government to be ordering thousands of guillotines to be used on the American people, the medical coding in Obamacare, if one looks at it at all closely, has a lot more horrific means of murder. All of them listed as, quote, legal execution by the World health authority, making it the Mengele of health organizations, meaning that if they say that you have Ebola and there's no cure, they're just going to off you and burn your body.
That's some scary thought. We'll be right back, guys and gals. On that note, 32 Degrees of Insanity, right here on the Truth Frequency Radio Network. My special guest tonight, Alfred Webre. Guys, this is some important stuff. You know, I mean, could this actually happen right here in the United States? Could guillotines be used against the United States citizens in regards to a Ebola outbreak? You know, I've got a question in regards to the guillotines and why they want to sever the heads of people. And I think there is a reason behind that spiritually. We'll be right back on 32 Degrees of Insanity right here on the Truth Frequency Radio Network. Now we have a big scare here with Ebola. I'm going to bring Alfred Webre back onto the show, and we'll have about another half hour to talk about this. Alfred, this is some scary stuff.
Yeah, you know, and just to add some more data, we now have, and we'll be putting these links up on ecologynews.com as well. The U.S. military is now prepping for an Ebola attack or an Ebola pandemic, and is distributing Ebola detection units to all the military in all 50 states. Now, why would that be? Why would that be? Why would that be? I mean, you know, this has the flavor of a combined, coordinated military false flag operation. On a certain date, you flood the border. On other dates, you know, you have the CDC put out false information. On another dates, you make sure that the U.S. Army has kits in all 50 states. Then, you know, you make sure that your lab, which your Ebola lab in Africa, which is funded by George Soros, who is a front for the Rothschilds and the genocidal, satanic bloodline, 13 bloodline families who are named in the book of Revelation as, quote, the synagogue of Satan, and the black nobility of Europe, who in 1952 founded the Bilderberger Group, and their first act, and this is all propaganda, you know, their first act in 1953 was to found, quote, the Club of Rome to deal with population programs.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's, say, you know, oh, our plan is to depopulate the world by 90%. So our first PR thing in 1953 is, oh, we're going to found the Club of Rome to, quote, deal with population programs. This is how the Satanists have dealt with, like, the world population, kind of lull them to sleep. You know, we might as well all wake up. You know, the International Common Law Court of Justice has just issued verdicts. It's now found with full legal process, due process, with multiple witnesses and evidence, that in what a billion people think is the bastion of holiness, is God's manifestation on the planet, that all the popes, in fact, all the popes, when they become pope, they have to join what's called the Ninth Circle, which means that they have to go through a satanic ritual in which they kill newly born infants, drink the infant's blood, eat the infant's flesh, and kill, kill the infant, and that's how they take on that power, and that's what gives them the power to be able to ride around in the Pope mobile in their hat and their thing, and have 1 billion people worship them and their shtick.
Let me ask you one question here, Alfred, and I correct me if I'm wrong. And I've heard something. We were talking about the guillotines, and basically putting these people under the guillotine. Now we're seeing, the extremist Muslims, they cut the heads off of people. We're seeing the guillotine used more and more now. I have heard that if the head is chopped off, basically that traps the soul. Is that something you've heard as well?
Well, certainly what you have coming out of the crown chakra on the top of the head is a silver cord, which goes non-locally and is based in, basically it goes to the interdimensional portals in our solar system, through our galaxy, to the interdimensional portals of our universe, and that's one of your deep connections with
a source,
to a source. Whether or not it can trap your soul, I think, is highly doubtful. I haven't seen any solid replicable data on that, and in conjunction with a newly published book that I have called The Dimensional Ecology of the Omniverse, in which basically what we did is to go beyond string theory, which only goes up to the multiverse, which is a collection of all the universes of time, space, energy, and matter. And we said, there is solid science and replicable evidence gathered according to the scientific method, for the existence of dimensions which are beyond the multiverse, namely the intelligent civilizations of souls in the interlife dimensions, and spiritual beings and source in the spiritual dimensions, and this data is as sound as any data that physicists have for the atomic structure. So, and that makes up the omniverse. Basically, the formula for the omniverse is all the universes in the multiverse, plus the souls and the spiritual entities and source in the spiritual dimensions, equals the omniverse. We go beyond the multiverse. So that's a new discovery that we've made. I haven't come across a case that would show that the soul is trapped in this dimension because of the head. Now, maybe that's the intention. Back in the days... Or maybe
that's the thought that they have. They think that's happening.
Yeah.
Sure.
Going back to the Spanish Inquisition times, what the Spanish used to do then is that when they had an enemy that they really wanted to screw up, they would get a beautiful woman for the enemy, and when the enemy was in bed with the woman, they would kill him, because according to their Catholic minds, he would die in a state of mortal sin and go to hell. So not only would they kill him, but he would go to hell. And of course, from a scientific parapsychological point of view, that's nonsense. And so, but certainly it's a very traumatic death, And that trauma and that fear is what the lower fourth dimensional Draco reptilians that the Illuminati and their minions work for. That's their kind of gravy. So I think
their food.
I think that's what it's about. It's getting that extra fear factor.
Sure, yeah, and which would and I've always, one of the things that I believe when it comes to death is, we've talked about this light that people are supposed to go to. I think that is kind of maybe even a trick of some sort, because I would think that you would have to go through the darkness. I mean, even Jesus Christ went through 3 days of darkness just to get to heaven. And I'm thinking that is something that, even you to listen to and read the Egyptian Book of the Dead or the Tibetan Book of the Dead, you have to walk through this darkness to get to where you're going.
Yeah. Still, it's a fairly straightforward process, because if you look at the process of reincarnation, the essential technology that's used in reincarnation is teleportation.
Teleportation, yeah.
Which the U.S. has achieved now, has had for 40 years. Basically, assuming that the birth is normal, once all the planning and has been done in the interlife, a soul that is preparing to wear one of his aspects, because the soul can maintain a number of incarnations in different dimensions and as different sorts of beings at once. That aspect of the soul, say, that would be incarnating as a human, say on Earth, they would teleport through an interdimensional portal between the interlife and our time-space hologram, our Earth time-space hologram, to the time-space coordinates right next to the womb of the mother, and kind of be there for about 3 months, get very close to the fetus, and then at one point enmesh itself into the fetus. And then at the moment of death, assuming that it's a normal death, the soul essentially teleports back out through the interdimensional portal into the interlife, and that portal, can be depicted as, quote, a light. So
sure.
Yeah. So it's the physics behind it is fairly simple.
I said this on my show before, and I know that there's all of this negativity going around, and there is, we've got these psychological operations, we've got all these things happening. We definitely know that the elites want to get rid of every single one of us. Now we don't matter to them. But can we say anything positive that these guys are not going to be able to go through with the plans that they think they're going to get? Is there any way we can win?
Yes. No. These plans are not going to happen. And one of the principal reasons that they're not going to happen is that, starting with, some people say, October 28th, 2011, other people say the end of 2012, the interdimensional portal at the core of our universe began to broadcast, which we can call the voice of God, or whatever you want to call it, began to broadcast waves of unity consciousness. Now, the difference between duality consciousness and unity consciousness is that duality consciousness is I win, you lose. And that's what the last cycle, say, from 11,500 years ago or more, or maybe the entire last cycle of 26,000 years, has been about I would say 11,000 years ago, when we moved from the golden age into a dark age, and we're sort of coming out of that now. We have been in duality consciousness, which is I win, you lose. And that's what the Matrix thrives on. I win, you lose. You know, that's how they operate. But now all of a sudden, the field has changed to unity consciousness, which is we are one. So none of their enterprises can get off the ground. Look, Malaysian Airlines MH370 false flag was a failure. We blew it out of the water on the first day by showing that the U.S. Navy shot down MH370 over Singapore on the first day, and then covered it, had the press cover it up, and then played Where's the Plane for 30 days, but it didn't do anything. Yeah, and then MH17 was such a failure that today the White House leaked that, oh yeah, it was the Ukrainians that shot it down. It wasn't the Russians. You know, because it's over. They can't get it going. They can't get it started. Israel invaded Palestine originally under the tetra lunar eclipses of 1947 to 1948. We now have the tetra lunar eclipses, the 4 lunar eclipses of 2014 to 2015.
15, correct. We got 3 more to go, right?
Yeah, yeah. This whole false flag of Israel and Palestine. By the way, Israel founded Hamas. That's what nobody says. That's the truth. Israel founded Hamas so that they would have a push me, pull you that automatically lobs these safe rockets into Israel on command, so that then Israel can come in and whomp Gaza, you know, all at once. And meanwhile, what Israel wants is they want the gas reserves and the mineral reserves off of Gaza.
Of Gaza, yeah.
And they want to kill that, and they just want to take it over. So they created Hamas as a phony enemy, and
kind of like ISIS.
Yeah, yeah, it's a totally phony enemy. So then, and the world press and the world leadership structure are all Satanists. So they go along with it.
They'll go right or go along right with it. Exactly.
Yeah. So it's up to us in the alternative media. It's up to us as citizens to be smart, to wake up, to be conscious, to pay attention, to get off our butts, to be active, to help others awaken. If people don't understand that the price of not awakening is to get 90% Ebola'd, and if we haven't shown that tonight, I don't know what else we can show.